You are listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network.
اليمين هناك لشوارشتايجر
Va a pegarle Ronaldinho Gaucho. Ya lo hace. Pierna derecha, directo al arco. ¡Golazo! 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 ¡Golazo!
This is Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio, your new live show about the beautiful game in all its glory, with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee. MLS, EPL, La Liga, Champions League, all is fair game. Powered by the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us at sportspodcastingnetwork.com.
Welcome to Soccer Today. I am Duane Rollins. Contrary to popular belief, WrestleMania is still not ongoing. It did stop after only 7 hours, I believe. I actually watched WrestleMania for the first time in years last night to see out the great career of The Undertaker. At least I'm told. I haven't really watched in a long time. But at any rate, we'll maybe talk about that a little later, Kevin and I, for a couple seconds. But joining us on the line from Halifax is James Covey. He's a member of the Halifax Wanderers Supporters Club. At least I assume you're in Halifax. You're out in Nova Scotia anyway. How you doing, James?
Doing well, thank you. Yep, I'm out here in Halifax.
All right. Maritime guest. We haven't had one for a while. When I was converting the time, I had to go forward rather than back. It's usually the other way around. But all right, James, there was a big meeting there last week where we had quite a nice turnout by looks of the photos. Tell us a little bit about what that meeting entailed and sort of what you took away from it.
Sure. Well, we had Paul Byrne, obviously, repping the Canadian Premier League. And as well, we had Derek Martin, who is the president of Sports and Entertainment Atlantic. And they are essentially the prospective team owners out here. So Paul essentially pitched his vision for the league and put a big emphasis on, a place for Canadian players to ply their trade in their own country. And then Derek took us through the presentation that his group gave to City Council here about the stadium plan. And it was really exciting for us in our little, very new supporters group for a couple of reasons. One was Paul on his vision of the league was talking about the fact that this is really meant to be, top tier in Canada, and he talked about sort of why that is. That was really good to hear. And on the stadium plan, hearing about things like our own entrance for the supporters group, and some of they're already thinking well ahead about how supporters culture works and how that will fit in with the vision for the team. So it was really exciting on both those counts.
Yeah, let's stick with the stadium for a second. Having lived out there for a while, I understand the struggles that have gone on for years to have stadiums built there. That stadium at Smoo isn't very good. At least the last I was there, it was pretty much falling down, and it was about 10 years ago the last time I was there. So how badly is something like that needed in Halifax in your mind?
Well, very badly. It's quite a topic that has a lot of cynicism and negativity connected to it out here, because the struggle to get a bigger stadium, bigger than what this plan entails, that's been going on for something like 35 years. From the point where the CFL had awarded a franchise out here that never played a game because the stadium fell apart. And so there's literally millions of dollars have been spent over the last 3.5 decades on studies and plans, none of which have ever gone anywhere. And so as soon as you say stadium in Halifax, it's like hackles go up. And the number one thing people want to know is, are we wasting more public money on a plan that's going nowhere? So when the idea came from SEA to take a historic piece of Halifax, right in the center of the city, and try to bring back, some kind of former glory. I mean, the Wanderers grounds have been a place where important sporting events historically happened in Halifax going back to the 1880s. So the idea to make it kind of a meeting place for those kind of spectacles again, and to do that without any public money. Basically, they're saying to the city, we'll pay to put up a stadium if you'll let us, manage the stadium on those grounds. So this is a new idea. We haven't seen that kind of proposal in Halifax, to my knowledge, and I've been living here my whole life. So that's what set it apart and made it seem doable and therefore actually exciting.
Me and Duane and I, are not from Halifax or Nova Scotia. So can you tell us a little bit more, James, about SCA, Sports Entertainment Atlantic, and what they do on a day-to-day in the Halifax and the Atlantic region?
Oh, well, I would say there are two or three sort of most notable productions lately. One was bringing back the National University basketball championships here, which were here for years and years. So they brought that back for it. So it was here this year and again next year. They also hosted the University Hockey Championships here. And they did a World Beach Volleyball event here a couple summers back, where they had their first experience putting up a temporary stadium. So at this recent event, they were telling us that they put up that waterfront stadium for 2,000 people. They put that up in 2 days and took it down at 1.
Yeah, no, that was my follow-up question. Since we've seen the Phoenix Rising's new stadium, the pop-up stadium that actually looks amazing, it doesn't look like a pop-up stadium. It changed the way we see the situation for smaller quote-unquote stadium, less 10,000 and less, and that could be the size and the scale that the Canadian Premier League is trying to launch at. How important is that pop-up stadium situation to maybe make the feasibility of the project and the sustainability, here we go, it's Monday morning, people, sustainability more easier?
It's it's very important. So what the group is planning to do here is to give this a 3-year run. So they're saying, let us, put up this temporary stadium, see what happens over the initial 3 years, and that should show some sense of long-term viability. So then if we want to look at something more permanent, should it be a bit larger, what have you, hopefully, if it's a success, that'll essentially give kind of community permission to take it to whatever the next level is. And that too seems to me to be a very smart way to approach this.
All right, James, let's turn our attention a little bit more to the soccer scene out there. Again, I lived out there a decade ago, and I lived in New Brunswick, not Nova Scotia, so it's not exactly apples to apples, but my experience out there was that there was some dedicated fans, but maybe not as many as in other parts of the country. And I don't mean to be despairing when I say that. That's just my observation. Can you just give us a bit of an understanding of how big the soccer community is out there now in 2017 compared to when I last experienced it, and how sustainable a long-term fan base in your mind is?
Well, so I'll say 2 or 3 things about that. One is that we've absolutely never had a significant high-level team or event to give a focus to soccer out here. That's not something we've really seen. And of course, one of the failed stadium attempts out here was in advance of the Women's World Cup, and there was some talk and effort put toward getting in on that, and that didn't happen. So there hasn't been a focus for that. There is a large community of people out here who play the game. So it's as is true, I think, pretty much across Canada, or at least in a lot of Canada, there's very high participation rates here. And then the other thing I would say is that the general kind of cultural shift we're seeing, where soccer is just much more like high-level soccer is much more available to be seen on television, online. All of those cultural shifts apply here as much as they do in the rest of Canada. There's definitely a lot more awareness than there was even a handful of years ago. Certainly much more knowledge of the game I'm seeing than, say, back in 1991, the 1 year that we had a professional franchise out here in the CSL, good old Nova Scotia Clippers. Yeah, they came and went. But yeah, it's a much different place right now, and I think that's not unique to here. It's a much different Canada we're seeing for soccer, in the last several years.
There was noise out of Moncton last week as well. I think maybe they're reacting to some of the attention that's getting into Halifax. Of course, they do have the stadium there. Like the population base out in the Maritimes is smaller. It's more. It's a smaller part of the country, right? In your mind, could there be two teams out there potentially one day? Could that possibly work, or is it really something where maybe one team is the better way to at least start?
It remains to be tested, really. I don't see us pulling in a lot of fans for games in Halifax from far outside of the city. I mean, it's a 3-hour drive to Moncton. I'm a little bit skeptical of the talk that came out of there, because it seemed it was more the soccer association running it up the flagpole. I didn't really see a sign of like investors willing to step forward. If that happened, I mean, I would love for us to have a local rival. I don't see the issue of having enough fans. I don't see it as us kind of competing with Moncton for the same fans. I feel confident that Halifax will support this team in large numbers. I don't know if Moncton can. If they could, that would be great. But their opportunity, if you like, seems much more hypothetical to me at this moment.
James, now let's talk about the level that the league is going to launch at. A lot of people are wondering if it's going to be high enough to gather a lot of attention. What kind of level, what kind of player, the Canadian content. As a supporter in a city that didn't have a lot of professional soccer over the last few years, is it something that is a worrisome aspect? Do you worry about the level, or a professional team, any level, any type of superstars is what's needed?
Well, so my thought on that, Paul Byrne said something interesting when he was talking about this number of the 200 Canadian players who are applying their trade professionally abroad right now. His view is a number of them, aren't at the level that this league is going to be looking for. So they really want to look at players that are playing at first or second level in significant European leagues, for example, or South American leagues, and not, players from further down those pyramids. So I think that gives you some indication of what they're shooting for, and the way that he frames it seems very realistic to me. So I think we're going to see, like a really good product. Who knows if we'll have that out of the gate, but I feel good about that. The other thing I'll say is just, I've gone to games in a couple of the biggest stadiums, and I've gone to games in some of the, sort of smaller ones. And I really feel like the kind of close to the action view that spectators will have at these games, in a stadium that's 2,500 people on each side of the field, kind of 15 rows deep. You're going to be really close to the action, and I think that'll bring a lot of enjoyment for people. They may not realize just how compelling an experience that can be.
And now, my last question for you today, Paul, on my side, James, sorry, it's about Paul probably. So, we've seen the Wanderers, the branding with the tartan U's, with the Nova Scotia identity. What is going to be the correlation? There's going to be a name and colors eventually for that team. How does the Wanderers identity will fit with it? Is it going to be malleable? Because who knows, maybe the colors will be totally different. Maybe it's going to be inspired by the Wanderers designs as well. As a supporters group, the identity of it, where is it going, and where does it come from, the Wanderers as well?
Oh, sure. I'm going to say that we went with something that would be recognizably Nova Scotian, and that's just in the absence of having some of those, team colors and identity things figured out yet. So, provisionally, we've got this name for the team, Halifax Football Club. I say provisionally because I look at the language on the official website, and there seems to have been a little bit of, wiggle room left there. I feel like the name's sort of been run up the flagpole, and hopefully, or possibly it will stick. Should they decide to go with something else other than Halifax Football Club, and if they decided to use the Wanderers name, we've had this discussion already, and we think we would just change the name of our supporters group because we don't want to overlap too much. But we like this identity for the group, the Wanderers, because it's specific to the ground, where the stadium will be. And that's a big part of the appeal of this whole project. So, when we actually have official kind of team colors and identity, we'll look and see, okay, how do we want to tweak our supporters group identity so it's connected and overlapping, but also still distinct.
James, you are going to sing Barrett's Privateers as an anthem, right?
That's definitely pretty close to the top of the list. There's we had some music discussions early on. It was funny. That's one of the things that people started talking about first. I mean, we started meeting online on Skype in December, a matter of days after this, bid went public. Had our first meeting in person in early February, and that's been a big topic of discussion already. Yeah, I mean, it's what can I say? There's a big musical community and culture and tradition out here, and we feel like that's one of many things that kind of gives our supporters group an edge. I think we're going to have a lot of fun with this.
All right, just don't march from the Liquor Dome or something like that.
We'll try and figure out what our home base pubs are going to be. There isn't a real football pub out here yet, but we'll work on that.
I like it. I like the
Fair
yet
enough.
part. How about somebody in Halifax open up a foodie place?
Needs to happen.
Precisely. All right, James, tell anyone that's listening to this out in Nova Scotia in the Halifax area that wants to get involved, let them know how to do that, and then we'll say goodbye.
Yeah, sure. We're on Twitter, Wanderers_SG. You can find us on Facebook, and we've got a website as well. And we are having another in-person meetup this Saturday, April 8th, at the Italian Cultural Center, which is great. It's a co-present with them. So come on out and meet us, and hopefully we'll have some more scarves by then because we've sold through our first order.
All right, exciting times. I'm looking forward to it. Can't wait to get back out there again, and hopefully I'll be out there to watch a game sooner rather than later. James Covey, thanks again.
You bet. Thanks, guys.
You are listening to Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio. Visit sportspodcastingnetwork.com for more.
Welcome back to the show. Kevin, we didn't say hi off the top. I did mention that I, broke my 7-year slump on watching wrestling last night. You're more of the wrestling fan. You have a wrestling show.
I used to. I haven't done it in like a year. But no, it's the one day a year where we all are okay with maybe feeling like we're 10-year-old again for one night.
It is, I was with some friends. I said, it's kind of like the Super Bowl, that even if you don't pay attention, why not? It just doesn't hurt to go out and have some crap food and drink a couple beer and watch wrestling and remember. And that's generally most of the conversations I had last night went back to the old days. And it helped that Ric Flair's daughter was involved in the card, so then I could woo. I got to woo. That was exciting.
Well, you say it's it's like a Super Bowl. It's a big spectacle. It's crazy, the size, the scale. But let's put it in the soccer term. All right. So who would be in the world of soccer the heel, the top heel of the company? Who would be the top baby face? Let's do it Major League Soccer style for now. Who's your top heel? Who's your top baby face?
Well, the first thing that jumped to mind was outside MLS. It would have been,
Ronaldo,
Cristiano
Messi.
Ronaldo would have been kind of your heel, well, kind of that anti-hero
Yeah.
heel, right? Like some people
CM
love him,
Punk.
a lot of people hate him.
Yeah, Ronaldo's like the CM Punk, maybe.
Yeah,
He thinks he's better than you. He knows he's better
exactly.
than you.
And Messi, he'd be like, forgive me, I'm not good with the names right now, but he'd be
it's
kind of the
fine.
baby face that's a little too good to be true.
Messi's like Bob Backlund. He's a little too short, but he's gonna get things done and have a long reign, and he already has. But no, yeah, it's a funny discussion. You never know where. You have sometimes like players. Let's put it all right. MLS, Jermaine Jones. He kind of embraces that heel persona and goes with it, and he's himself in that way. So maybe Jermaine Jones is a heel in Major League Soccer WWE /
Yeah, well, Michael Bradley. What's that All-American dude? John Cena, is that right?
Yeah, John
anyway,
Cena's Michael
that-
Bradley. No, John Cena's Clint Dempsey. Clint Dempsey's John Cena.
Yeah, okay, there you go. Yeah, the deuce. Lots of fun stuff there. Yeah, I don't have enough of a depth of knowledge to go much further.
Who's Hulk Hogan?
When it comes to
Who's Hulk Hogan? Like, is it? It has to be, Mr. Lawless, right? He's Hulk Hogan. Maybe not.
because he's retired now.
Retired,
too,
and
right?
he's like a big. Used to be a big name. He used to be the face that runs the place.
Exactly. We don't have enough. Breck Shea, he could be someone too. He'd be one of the villains for sure. Yeah, absolutely. We could do this for a while. If you have any other ideas out there, I know there's a big crossover, but this is why I don't mind talking about this for a few seconds on here. There's a big crossover in the soccer fan world in North America to the wrestling world. And I don't know quite what that says, but there is.
I don't know. Maybe it's because people that used to fall in love with soccer 15, 20 years ago, it's a fringe aspect. And on the fringe, everything gets appealing. And when you're on the fringe of mainstream, you kind of fall in love with different aspects of it. Maybe there's something there.
Yeah, there's probably something there. I also think the video game phenomena is part of it too. That a lot of people, just like they got into soccer through playing EA Sports, got into wrestling by playing wrestling video games.
True,
that's part of my theory as well.
Oh yeah, no, there's
All right.
definitely something there. But Duane,
Well,
if I had to
go
choose
ahead.
myself, I would be a baby face, because I can't really be mean and really mean it. So nobody would believe me, and I would have to make a turn and become nice, and then people will go with me.
I think I'd be one of those guys that was very popular in one part of the world and really hated in another part.
So you're
kind
Bret
of what
Hart.
Bret Hart used to do?
You're Bret Hart.
Yeah, I'd be like Mr. Trontonian, and then I'd go to Vancouver and I'd get the shit thrown at me. It'd be amazing.
I'm Duane Rollins, the best there is, the best there was, and the best there ever will be.
Representing the center of the universe.
Toronto.
Yeah, that's what I'd be. I'd be Mr. T.O.
Weighing 165 pounds in the blue corner, Duane Rollins.
Okay. All right. Quickly on that. Are you sad that the Undertaker's done now?
Come on. He's been wrestling since I've been born. Give the guy a break. Let the guy enjoy life. Let the guy not have to dye his hair every few months. Can't be good for your scalp. And it's long overdue, maybe.
And look, not to make too fine a point of this, I've seen what his wife looks like. Maybe he should just enjoy being with his wife for a while now without having to feel like he's dying.
Exactly.
All right, let's move on a little bit here. Completely flipping gears. There is no segue from the WWE to the potential of Canadian soccer in North America growing. But Anthony Tatera is reporting yesterday on Twitter. All of Anthony's gems come out on Twitter with a boom attached to them. So boom, that MLS and the Canadian Soccer Association, the CSA, are having high level meetings this week to discuss quote unquote all things Canadian.
Yeah.
What does this mean, in your opinion? Any
I've
speculation?
We have a follower, a listener, Mike McGuire, who's in the Maritimes, and he brought up a very good point on social media when he saw Tatera's tweet. He mentioned, I don't know, it's kind of weird. Like, it seems like Canada has some leverage in discussions for the first time in a long, long time, where You actually want to get to a table and talk now. So we'll see what comes of it. Well, maybe MLS wants to be part of the potential CPL, whatever the case may be. It might be not related to the CPL itself. It is, though, interesting that high level officials on both sides wants to meet up and talk about Canadian soccer.
Yeah, look, I've been told by many people that, well, it's not, it's an open public knowledge that TFC at least has spoken pretty openly about wanting to be involved in the Canadian Premier League and being mostly rejected at this point in time. If you read Halifax Wanderers memos or notes from them from the meeting when Paul Burns said that they weren't interested in being a reserve league for MLS, the crowd cheered. Like it's right in the notes. Crowd cheers. So that tells you what the attitude outside of the hardcore fan base of TFC might be. But even within the hardcore fan base of TFC, I'm not sure I see a lot of support for that. I think a lot of people that are right deep within the TFC culture understand the need for the Canadian Premier League to be its own thing, because ultimately a lot of them are voyageurs as well, right? The other thing I've heard too is that Montreal has no interest in this. By the way, Joey Saputo has no time for it, and that's why they're a team in Quebec right now seems dead in the water, and that's unfortunate and a topic maybe for another day. But the Whitecaps are more quietly than TFC, also saying the same things. That's what I've been told. So you have these two MLS teams that want to be part of it. How do you do that without putting that perception out there that the league is second rate? That's the difficult question. In theory, would TFC 2, for instance, and the Whitecaps 2, would they be okay in that league? I think the quality is going to be higher than them. So maybe on some level, I kind of want to see them go in and struggle, and then, they have to understand that. But, I just don't know what the answer is to get MLS involvement with the Canadian Premier League without having that thing. Maybe is there a third party? Maybe
it's something we haven't think about. Maybe MLS is not the MLS. Yes, you have those clubs around Vancouver that might want to be part of it. But what if MLS becomes partner in a teacher-mentor role to make sure that they have the single entity model and how to have maybe a Canadian Premier League and a Canadian Premier League soccer management group that oversees the how they build the infrastructures for the league. MLS has some knowledge and experience that could be beneficial. Maybe it's those aspects of a relationship that needs to be worked on before we talk about maybe MLS teams in that league. Maybe they can be like a big brother.
Yeah, you would hope that there might be some cooperation there. And I because there is a lot of knowledge that can be gained from talking to. There's people that work in Major League Soccer that have been there since '96 still, right? They know exactly what the Canadian Premier League is about to go through in terms of those first few years. And that there's going to be mistakes made. That there's going to be hilarious stories that get told 20 years later, hopefully when the league's still running, about some of the stuff that they had to do to make it work. That's going to happen in the first couple of years when you're finding your feet. And then, that could be charming as long as it works out in the end. So if you lean on people that have gone through it, then I think that that's successful. Look, if I'm going to dream right now, and we do live, this is going to sound contradictory in some way, but and I'm sort of just talking off the top of my head here, but we do live in a North American culture in which cross-border competition is pretty normal. Wouldn't it be great if MLS and the Canadian Premier League would work together and sort of have a cooperative, friendly relationship, because they're kind of in the same boat, for enough years that the Canadian Premier League could rise up, so that maybe something like a cup competition between the two leagues would be possible, or something that's a little outside the box.
A Super Cup, maybe a Super Cup is possible, like you have in the spring or in the winter. I don't know how you would do it, but a Super Cup of I don't know how you call it, the US Can Super Cup or whatever. You can't really say North America because Mexico's not involved, so you're like, I don't know how to call it. The Pan Am. No, it's not Pan Am. It's, I don't know, whatever the case may be, it's the Super Cup of Canada and USA. Maybe that's possible.
Yeah. Well, look, and there are other, on a very pragmatic level, the other thing that MLS teams might be interested in protecting is whether, because the CSA would have every right to give its CCL spot to the Canadian Premier League champion and just basically leave the three MLS teams unable to qualify. That I think probably won't happen. They'll probably stick with the Voyageurs Cup idea to give it to the champion that way. But nonetheless, it would be in the right. So the MLS might be looking to protect that as well. Hopefully, the CSA, what they will do is start to lobby and to perhaps get a spot in that first half of the CCL for the Canadian Premier League champions, and then have the Voyageurs Cup champion go into the second half of the draw in the two-prong thing, so that you would have the Canadian team playing against the Central American and the Caribbean teams in the first round. And I think that they might have a chance to get through that. So that'd be great to have two Canadian representatives in that final 16. But we're getting ahead of ourselves there. We have to get this thing launched first, Kevin. So nonetheless.
Exactly.
All right,
we need to see what has been happening in Halifax over the last few weeks in other cities. Like, we have proof, evidence on paper, black and white meetings and discussions and some transparency coming from from Halifax. We need to see more of those, and then the launching date is going to be closer and closer, and then we'll have more to talk about. But no, it's progress in the right direction. And in Halifax, what we're seeing is at least some willingness to finally not miss the boat on professional sports in new ventures, which has been the case in the maritime sports landscape, which is non-existent basically over the last few years at the top level of individual sports.
Yeah, look, we should almost put it on the bingo card, me making reference to the fact that I lived in the Maritimes for 5 years. Should be on the Spock Soccer Day bingo card. But the point I'm making with that is I do have a soft spot for the region, and I do want to see something out there eventually to allow them to grab a hold of, because it really is something that's missing. Their sporting landscape out there is unique in Canada, in the sense that they support, what they support much better than anywhere else in the country is college sport. I used to go to UNB games, all the UNB hockey games all the time, and there would be 5,000-6,000 people watching those games. They'll pack them for the championship game massive. It's probably the best program in the country, too, for that very reason. And that tells me that there is an appetite for sports there. And they will go and they will support local maritime sports if the options present themselves to it. And again, I look at their CIS success, their college sports success, and say, if they can do it there, they can probably do it with a professional soccer team. Although, soccer is not the tradition sport out there. It's baseball and hockey, but everything evolves. Like James said to us, they have the same sort of phenomena that's happening in the rest of the country is happening out there too. So hopefully this gets done. And look, if in fact I have the opportunity to pick a team out there and there is not a Toronto team, I would probably root a little bit for the Maritimes team above all else. All right, Kevin, let's take a quick break. We'll come back. And speaking of those Canadian MLS teams, we'll review them and what they did this weekend.
You're listening to Soccer Today on SPN Radio. You can find the on-demand version of this very show on iTunes, Stitcher, Feedburner, Podbay Player, Podbean, anywhere you get your podcasts under the Sports Podcasting Network feed. Subscribe to our YouTube page to make sure you never miss a live show talking about soccer today, the MLS postgame show, open lines after dark, 5 rings daily during the Olympics. Make sure you subscribe and give us a follow on Twitter at SportsPodNet, and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network. The Canadian Review on the Two Solitudes Soccer Podcast.
And welcome back. Speaking of baseball, opening day here, Toronto. Exciting times. Go Jays. It's a weird season for the Jays this year, Kevin. No one's really talking about them in any real way outside of this market. And I think that could be something that could be very interesting to watch this summer, but enough of that right now. Home opener for TFC on Friday night. It basically picked up from where it left off last on a miserable night down there, which is hilarious.
Weather-wise.
Celsius the next day.
Yeah, weather-wise, it was miserable, yeah.
it was everything was the same. I kept saying that to people around me to the point that they wanted to kill me. It's like, this just reminds me of December. This reminds me of December because I was freezing. Well, it was wetter. It was worse in there on Friday than it was, I think, at MLS Cup final. Maybe that was just because there was more people and it was kind of the excitement of the day. But no, it was so cold. And they just couldn't score. Osorio had the best chance. He still kind of has the yips in front of goal. And if that kid could ever figure out, and I shouldn't say kid now, he's 24 or something, but if he could ever figure out his ability to finish, I think his ceiling would be much higher than it is. But maybe at this point in time, we just should expect Jonathan Osorio is what Jonathan Osorio is, and he's always just going to be a player that is good passing the ball, but maybe not necessarily a great finisher, Kevin.
Yeah, no, and I'm going to touch on one point that you actually, I saw you talk about on social media last night. Clint Irwin now injured 4 to 6 weeks. It's Bono's team. Mr. Alex, I am not a singer for you too. Bono is now the starting goalkeeper for TFC. I know he's not your favorite option, and he's basically the only option now. How important is an injury for Toronto?
Oh, well, look, they have played so defensively solid for the first few weeks, and they have 3 of 4 clean sheets, and that's the glass half full. If you're a TFC fan, yeah, they've been struggling to score. Javinko hasn't hit the score sheet yet. Those are troubling things. But when you look at the 3 clean sheets, you can go, okay, as long as they can keep that together, the scoring should figure itself out. They don't get a lot of pressure against them right now. They possess the ball a lot. Bono has shown, or Bono, I guess is how you're supposed to say it. I should know this by now. Has shown that he does have the ability to be a shot stopper. My worry with Bono is that he makes terrible decisions sometimes. He's still a young keeper. He will, I think, is good for a couple howlers each year. We saw that against San Jose last year. My main issue with him last year was that I just didn't feel that we necessarily should have defaulted to him over the kid that had been in our system for years. And that kid is gone now. And who's the backup? And there's the other question with this is if something happens to him, what are you going to go? You're going to have to go down to your USL keepers, and they are green. There's not a lot of option down there. So it would be a very, very dangerous situation. It would be, if Bono were to get hurt, like let's just say some freakish thing happens in training this week and he's unavailable, they may need to make a trade. That's how desperate that situation would be at that particular point in time. They would have to probably go look for a veteran backup somewhere out there in the league. If it's only 4 to 5 weeks, I'm sure that they're going to roll the dice is basically what's going to happen now and hope that everything progresses normally. But if Irwin is out long term, 100%, they're going to have to find a veteran backup up there. Hell, maybe they could re-sign Konopka from Edmonton or something. Sorry, Edmonton fans, because they'd have to do something like that, I think, if this were the case.
Yeah, all right. So 0-0. So that's what we can take of it. Now let's move to Saturday, Duane. The debut of Bastian Schweinsteiger, to the surprise of everyone, after 2 training sessions only, he started the game for Chicago against Montreal. Obviously, it's the Canadian Review. Montreal, Duane, we've seen a moment. So we'll talk about the game in general, but before, I wanted you to listen to this.
Bernier. Tabla. Off the goalpost. His first MLS start. And Baloo, Tabla sneaks one in late for Montreal. Unbelievable.
What a moment for a Canadian kid.
Well, hopefully he's going to be a Canadian national team player. I think that's still up for grabs in that one. But,
no, Baloo has been playing for Canada at the international level. He scored against England in the U20 level. He is a Canadian. He will be playing for a Canadian national team. I am certain of that. Okay,
that I'm hopeful of that as well, because there have been some rumors out there that maybe he might look to his heritage, but hopefully, sure. It is a great goal there for him. And Bernier's been playing spectacular this year so far. The old man still got it. 4 assists on the season right now. That does lead the league right now.
And not just the league. He is now the assist leader in history for the Montreal Impact in MLS with that assist to Barutabla. He did not start the game, came in at the 62nd minute. He had a great impact on the game, no pun intended. Aregi did have some great moments and some terrible moments in that game too. But once again, late in extra time, after we all thought that it was all wrapped up, Curtains Tabla scored at the 89th minute. During the 89th minute, so the 90th minute, oh, it's all over. Montreal's going to win, 3 points on the road. Great performance, Instead, Montreal conceded a goal. Yeah, it was a great individual effort, a kind of fluke aspect of it that's rarely replicable. So it's hard to put fault, but still, Montreal conceded for the second time in 3 games a late equalizer that cost him 2 points.
Yeah, I think Tobias moved to Montreal to go to McGill or something. Like I think that's what's happening here, which is unfortunate for Impact fans because that's the second time this season or this year that you've allowed an injury time. And the serious answer to that and the serious question to that is whether the age of the Impact is playing a role in the late collapses.
But contradictory to this, Duane, Montreal's been playing a lot better in the second half in this 3-draw run. Every game in the second half, that's where they scored the most amount of goals. That's where they were effective. That's where they were able to have the advantage in those one-on-one, to have Patrice Bernier distribute the ball. And this is one thing interesting. If you go to MLSsoccer.com, you have that chart when you go to the box score where you can choose completed passes, unsuccessful passes, and see the movement going forward. And it's kind of funny. It's always on the flanks, and it looks like a U for Montreal. From the midfield to the attacking midfield part, which when they go to the final third, they go on the flanks and cross in or trying to find space. But Montreal had some chances. Their total shot and their total shot on target, off target, the ratio is respectable this year. The amount of shots, though, is a little bit subpar and gives you less probabilities of scoring. And one of the reasons for this is the open option for Montreal seems to be on the flanks lately. Last 3 games seems to always be on the flank. Mancosu does not necessarily, not that he's not playing well, but the option that he gives to the ball carrier is not always the best one, and the most efficient one and the most high probability one has been the flanks. Balutabla has been playing a great game, was a great influence with the ball carry on his side. Arduro as well. Piatti the games before. So you do see this, and to give Montreal more chance of scoring to maybe end the draw run and get a win finally this year is to maybe involve the midfield or have a different way of looking at it to open up those breakthrough possibilities from the middle of the midfield.
When it comes to the late goals, I mean, it can sometimes just be bad luck, right? Like that's something you can point to. Now, the problem with it was the last thought is that if you will start to allow more of them, then I think it starts to become psychological, and that's very difficult to fix because you start to panic. Even a seasoned professional might in the end. So hopefully that's not what's happening.
Yeah, well,
just real quickly,
what I mentioned on Off the Woodworks yesterday, Duane, by the way, you can listen to it, Off the Woodworks, from yesterday on the Sports Podcast Network. I mentioned that from Montreal, the way it happened both times against Seattle at home and against Chicago, it's a little bit different. They're not necessarily, there's no correlation between the two. They really got outplayed by Seattle. Against Chicago, it's one moment of brilliance from 2 players with a great body ball control to have a great volley and a winner by Solignac. And that is hard to replicate. And those 2 are not necessarily related, but it's still twice that it happened in 3 straight games. I think Friday against LA, if we see it again, then there's something there. But I think the problem will be addressed because of the fact that it happened twice in 3 games.
All right. To segue into the Vancouver game, we've mentioned a good young attacking player from Montreal. I didn't have a chance to in the Toronto segment, but Raheem Edwards, with his first ever start in Major League Soccer, played the full 90 and looked very good. Maybe one against Graham Zusi as well. So playing up against one of the established veterans of this league, he he had a great game, and it was maybe one of Toronto's brightest spots on the Friday. So that's another young Canadian playing in an attacking position. And the third Canadian in this that I'm segueing with, of course, is the guy that we've talked about a lot in this show, Alphonso Davies, with a decent game against the LA Galaxy. Should have drawn a penalty.
Yeah, not just that. The Laba goal, first Laba goal, which came, the Montero goal that came from a Laba cross, that came from a great cross pitch pass, cross type of pass from Davies. He actually set up that whole play. I still love what I see from Davies. And even though his name is not on the score sheet, he was influential and he was not costing his team anything. So for a 16-year-old now, it's still amazingly impressive.
Yeah, look, the penalty shout there. If anyone, this is one of my great pet peeves out there. There are some people, it's stone cold. Like, it's absolutely a penalty. There's people that are calling against it because, quote unquote, they touched the ball. Doesn't matter. It's not in the laws.
You cannot go through a player even though you touch the ball. That's clearly written in the law. So you can't go through a player. And if you do so, even though you might touch the ball, you might get all ball, as we say, you can't really go through the player.
It can't come from behind. That's as clear a penalty as I've ever seen. That didn't get called. Just a bizarre non-call there, but nonetheless.
You're right. I'm sorry to interrupt. It's just you're right, and it's in the Montreal game. You saw the same thing on Balou. Balou was tripped in the box, and it clearly was a penalty. It's clearly a foul in the box, and it wasn't called. Is it the young player aspect where the referee feel they can get away with it because it's not a superstar yet? It's a young player. I don't know. It's twice in the same day.
Yeah. 4-2 win for the Whitecaps. That was well needed. The other side of the equation there is the Galaxy, and I thought that they would be kind of continue where they were, but so far this year it looks like maybe this might be a step back season for the Galaxy as they try and transition into a new era without Bruce Arena there, without Robbie Keane there.
Yep, 10th in the Western Conference right now, the LA Galaxy, with only 3 points on the season, but it's the same for Montreal too, by the way. But the Galaxy not having the start needed with a lot of defeat. But just to finish on Montreal quickly too, it's 3 games in a row unbeaten, if you want to look at it, but 3 games in a row and 4 games with no win. So it's just positive, but a win is desperately needed now. Montreal, the only team that hasn't gotten a win in Canada so far, right? Toronto's got a win.
Yeah, they're one win, 3 draws. No losses. So yes, Toronto's half full, half empty, undefeated, or only with 1 win. Depends on how you want to look at it. Still early though. You look at the Eastern Conference standings, and there's only you can go from last to first with 1 win, basically. So not too early to look at standings. You don't look at MLS standings until June at the earliest. All right, Kevin. Let's take a little bit of a break. We'll come back. We'll sort of look at the rest of the schedule. Maybe look at Chelsea losing to Crystal Palace in the next block.
The bits and bytes on Soccer Today.
Couple things jumping out at me, Kevin. Look, Dynamo with the 4-1 win. They are scoring goals for fun this year. And obviously, we have to mention the fact that Minnesota United, God love them, they got a win. How bad is RSL then?
Well, yeah, exactly. Christian Ramirez, 2 goals. One of those goals came from a blunder from Nick Rimando. We're not used to seeing this, but Nick Rimando gets the ball and he kind of like fumbles it with his feet, trying to gain back to it. He turns around and Christian Ramirez beats him to the ball, goes all alone in front of an empty net, just puts it in for the go-ahead goal. I made it 3-1 at that point, and then Yohan Venegas 4-1. They finished off with a goal for RSL for a good measure, but it finished 4-2 for Minnesota. History has been made, a win for Minnesota finally at TCF Stadium, the home of the Minnesota Golden Gophers in the NCAA. But for Minnesota, Duane and Adrian Heath, that win and at least the 4-goal score, it must be nice to finally feel what the opponents of Minnesota have felt all season long.
Look, for sure, obviously. Now, I would find The two worrisome because they continued against a team that hasn't scored anything this year. They still allowed 2 goals. So this has hardly been fixed. They're out there making some changes. They're recognizing that they need some more MLS presence, veteran MLS defenders on there. They made some adjustments to that. They probably will straighten it out a little bit, but when's the first clean sheet for Minnesota United happen? That's going to be, I think, when you can finally look at that team and go, okay, maybe they're a real team now. 4-2 against RSL. I'm going to congratulate them, and I'm going to say that surprised me a bit. I assumed that they would lose that game. I assume they lose every game that they play in, but certainly they have shown that they can score this year. They just can't defend to save their life. A couple other, moving on from that one, I watched the Columbus-Orlando game and the NYCFC-San Jose game in their entirety. Both of them were interesting to me in different ways. Columbus looks good to me this year, and I did pick them second in the East behind Toronto in my preseason poll. I thought they were ready for a bounce back with adding Mane to that, which is already a pretty solid team. This is a sleeper team. Do not look away from them. I know Columbus is kind of anonymous sometimes out there. They were in the MLS Cup final in 2015. They did have the problems with Kamara and so on and so forth last year. Kai, not Ola. Hello. But they look solid to me this year. And Orlando, with their first road game of the year, they were the only undefeated team out there heading into this game. Pretty solid win for the Crew, and a very impressive start for them so far in this season, Kevin.
No, exactly. So it'll be surprising there too. The Dynamo at Portland have been surprising in the Western Conference. We have seen teams like the Quakes go back to reality now with a few defeats. They had a hot start. It's the schedule has a lot to do with it too, and it takes a few weeks to establish the hierarchy of where everybody actually stands. You might look good in 1 week playing against maybe a subpar team, Minnesota, and then come out to play other games and not look so good. For Atlanta, Duane, 0-0 against Seattle on Friday night. They haven't scored on that game, first game of the season where they didn't score. They were missing their key player, and until actually Saturday, the Golden Boot leader, Joseph Martinez, for 4 to 6 weeks. Now they do have some searching to do to find more goals, but 0-0 on the road against Seattle, one of the toughest places to play in Major League Soccer. It's still a positive result for Tata Martino and United.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and I'm sure that they'll look at it that way. They get a big match with Toronto FC this Saturday coming up, 7:30 Saturday. That I think that they'll basically back-to-back weeks against the MLS Cup finalists last year. They have to look at that as a measuring stick, and if they can get a result out of Toronto in these back-to-back road games, then you really do start to wonder whether or not this team might not just be a playoff team, but a team that could contend for the top of the East. Real quickly on that, I mentioned NYCFC San Jose. San Jose still does look pretty good to me, but NYCFC with a couple nice goals in that game. The Harrison goal was really nice. The one thing I wanted to talk about was San Jose's goal, and I was ranting about this on Twitter the other day while I was watching the game. Pirlo is completely at fault in that goal. He does this crappy back pass. And if you can watch the replay, just watch what he does after he gives that terrible ball back to the keeper. He's out for a stroll. Like, there are zero you-know-whats to give at that point in Andrea's life. And that made me crazy.
Should I run? Nah, I'm not gonna try to pull a hammy to get that ball back.
Yeah. And you compare that to go back to the previous block and talk about Schweinsteiger for a second, because we didn't really address his game. The goal was powerful. It's very German, the goal.
Very strong header. Like, he had the perfect, the ball was just low enough that he could not just jump for it, but jump while running towards it. So you get that momentum of going forward when it hits a ball at exactly the perfect point when the ball starts to go down in its trajectory, and then you have the perfect weight that you can put on the ball, and the power was there. Like, Evan Bush put 2 hands on it, but he could not do anything to keep it out of the goal.
Yeah, and what impressed me though about Schweinsteiger's game, first off, that's a beautiful header, and like I saw people dismissing it as, he scored a header from 6 yards out in a perfect cross. No, that's was a perfect header.
Yeah, it was. And Mancosu did a very similar one too. That was actually funny to see, like almost perfect, almost identical, the leap and the hit. And but Schweinsteiger, not only that, he actually played well. If you look at the Audi player index, yeah, it's not a perfect way to assess performance in a individual way, but it is a very high indicative of how a player performed. And he was one of the top Chicago players on the field, if not one of the top players on the field on Saturday.
It was those through balls that he was sending in the second half were devastating. And if they had better finishers, then Montreal might have been looking at a loss in that game. Chicago, to me, with him in there in that lineup, having watched that game, if they can figure the back line out, and I'm not sure they're going to, but if they can, then yeah, this is a playoff team for sure, I think, and a team that could maybe pull an upset off if they were to make the playoffs, because he is a game changer, and he, more to the point and more importantly, cares. It seemed like that's the comparison. I look at Pirlo, I look at Schweinsteiger, and it's night and day. Pirlo's out, like he's having a vacation in New York. There's more Instagram photos of him the other day, like sitting on something. Like,
yeah. Well, he was at the beach like the last week, the international break. I saw a picture of him. I think it was Miami, but I'm not sure. I recognize the landscape, but he was in a condo on a high rise on the balcony close to the beach.
There you go. That's seems to be what he's doing over here right now. And I'm pretty sure that if you were to get inside Patrick Vieira's head, he would be very much looking forward to shaking Andrea Pirlo's hand the last time he steps off that field and wishing him a happy retirement.
Does
good luck,
he finish the season? Does Andrea Pirlo retire in the summer window, like I have predicted in the prediction show earlier this season?
If those kind of, if he's going to, there will be, he's owed money, right? So they would have to figure something out. It doesn't benefit you fully. You would get half of his salary off the book is basically what you would do. And basically NYCFC has to decide both commercially and football wise, whether or not that makes sense for them. If in fact that is a conversation happening right now, but I think they will be, I think that they have figured it out a little bit, but he is like the last little bit of the players that were there that they brought in for the big splash at the start where they didn't quite understand the full league. And I think now that they've been in it for 3 years, there's hints that could be a very good team moving forward. In fact, with watching the Red Bulls lose 4-1 to Houston, maybe NYCFC might be ahead of the game in terms of bringing the first MLS Cup back to New York. But
Houston's pretty good though. Like, I don't know how much of that is on the Red Bulls. Like I might see the onus of that game. There's a penalty in there. There's a wonder goal by Kubotora. So it could have been 2-1. I don't think it's necessarily like a total domination in that game. That it's indicative of how the Red Bulls are good or not. But I think they're very close. And Tommy Mack, Harrison especially, Tommy Mack when he was subbed in actually scored a nice goal too. But they are fighting their ways. And David Villa, once again, Duane, is one of the best players in the league, and you might not agree or with how he was treated last year with the MVP and the no Jovinko in the conversation, but David Villa really, Villa. I'm gonna say it properly for once. David Villa. There you go. David Villa is one of the best players still in Major League Soccer.
All right, I'll pronounce a bunch of League One players' names next, and we'll see how I do. But anyway, that's he's a brilliant player for sure. And again, with the effort thing, it's like such a juxtaposition between him and Pirlo, like it's night and day. All right, I want to quickly go to the Premier League to end the show. With not a lot of Premier League talk today, obviously, but I don't know, 7 points. Is it a title race?
It could be. Well, it's unfortunate. 2 moments of brilliance in about a 10-minute span for Crystal Palace against Chelsea. Chelsea tried really, really hard, but Crystal Palace were able to hold on for the win. Chelsea had like maybe 10 chances in the last 20 minutes, but couldn't bury at home against Crystal Palace, and they lost the first game in 6 months at home at the Bridge. And now it's like Antonio Conte mentioned, maybe the title race is back being open, unfortunately, but it's still advantage Chelsea going forward.
It's 7 points. We're less than 10 games left in the season here. So it would require a collapse for this to happen. Now, we've seen collapses before. We saw Liverpool basically cough it up just 2 years ago. So that that is something that has happened, but I just don't get the sense with Chelsea. But what you're also seeing here, Man United has 2 games in hand on a club like Liverpool, 1 game on hand on most of the rest of the teams and all the rest of the teams above them. So they are the one sort of wild card in there. But other than that, I think that your top 4 are looking pretty solid right now. Liverpool sneaking in there to take the spot that Arsenal has held for years. It looks like Arsenal with that draw against City on the weekend. I think the top 4 is out this year. I think the FA Cup's all they have left for. If one of those teams is to drop back, honestly, I think it would be City based on their motivation right now. They seem to be playing out the string a little bit. 2-2 draw. They should have really closed that game out. But not a lot to talk about at the top of the Premier League this year, to be honest. It's not really been the most compelling of races. We'll see how this one finishes off. But any thoughts on the Premier League weekend, Kevin, or shall we just call it a day as it is now, 11 o'clock, and that's normally when we stop?
Yeah, we should call it a day for now, but it might be open. Leicester are showing some fight now. I'm pretty sure they're not going to go down, having found their scoring boots once again, especially Jamie Vardy. But other teams like Swansea continue to get out of their slump. But you do have Sunderland, which I think it's the year the Black Cats are going down. Right?
They're going to flip teams up there. Newcastle's going to go up and Sunderland's going to go down. No, I think Middlesbrough and Sunderland are pretty much dead in the water right now. You can look at West Ham, Burnley, Crystal Palace, Swansea, Hull. Those are probably the teams that are more likely to go down. I would give West Ham enough of an experience advantage that they should be able to hold up there. I have a hunch it's going to be either Crystal Palace, Swansea, or Hull for that third spot. Just 4 points separate those 3, and Swansea and Hull City just 1 apart there. All right, let's take a long break, Kevin. Let's take a very long break, about 23 hours.
Yep.
Until that time, I'll let you, as always, say goodbye.
You can follow Duane on Twitter at 24th Minute and myself at Kev Laramee. The show at Soccer Today SPN on Facebook, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network, and facebook.com/Canadian Soccer News. You can read our written work on CanadianSoccerNews.com. And until tomorrow, as always, have a great soccer. You were listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us, sportspodcastingnetwork.com.